Why are some souls able to move on when they die, while for others they are held back by hate, grief, or unfinished business, such as wishing to right an injustice that was perpetrated on them, and they are unable to or do not wish to pass over until that business is completed. Others appear to be able to go backwards and forwards at will between the dimensions. Death will always be one of life's great mysteries. The following are 3 ghost stories, all different from one another, yet intriguing nonetheless. Number 3. The River Ghost, Northamptonshire, England. The following true story is told by Mr. K.P. Roscoe, who ran an electronics and surveillance company. He said that in July 1998, at about 3 p.m, he was walking his collie dog, called Pip, on a remote part of the River Ice. The path he was on was very gravelly, so anyone walking on it would have made a lot of noise. Whilst he was standing in quiet surroundings, for some strange reason, something made him turn around. He slowly turned his head 180 degrees and had the fright of his life. A young woman of about 18 was staying a couple of yards away, staring into the river, and appeared unaware of his presence and dressed in strange clothing. She had a very cheeky smile on her face. He was about to speak to her when she walked towards the river and picked up a stone. Then she turned to look at him and smiled, and then stood next to a tree. He then turned around to see what his dog was doing and called out to him, but he refused to come. His dog was closely observing the young woman from a distance, but would not move. This was all done in a split second, and as he quickly looked back at the girl, she had gone. The following day, he could not stop thinking about this young woman. Around 10 days later, he returned to the exact same spot and was checking out his mobile phone, and at the same time noticing that his dog did not look at ease. He then looked up, and there was the woman barely 4 yards away and again staring into the river as previously. He then said, "Christ, girl, do you ever walk anywhere or you just appear in front of people?" She turned to him and said, "I do that a lot." She was wearing the most amazing clothing. Just as before, a red velvet double-breasted jacket with brass buttons, a real flower in her lapel, and a very old-fashioned dress above her ankles. Her watch was very old. He got closer to her and asked the time, and she replied, 10 minutes past the 4 o'clock, which he thought was very strange phrasing. Actually, it was not the right time, but was really 10 minutes past 3. He tried to engage her in a conversation, but she said that it was late and she must leave. As he bid her farewell, he noticed that she went right into a patch of nettles up to her neck, and as he was closely watching, she disappeared into thin air. He then ran around looking everywhere for her, but she was nowhere to be found. As he returned to the path, he looked across a field full of sheep, and she was waving at him from at least a quarter of a mile away. He said that she would have needed a jet engine to get where she was, but it did not end there. Barely a week later, he was filming with a semi-pro video camera at a different location on the river, making a nature film with the audio turned off. He could observe the scenery for miles around, but then, as he looked at his battery case, he could see the reflection of someone at his side. He jumped in fright and screamed, "You've done it again! You've scared the life out of me!" She just said, "It's a beautiful day." Realising that his camera was still playing, he put it under his arm and stood facing her. She looked at the camera and said, "What pray is that?" He told her what it was and slowly placed the camera on the ground, believing he had captured her on tape. As he looked up, she was gone, and he has never seen her since. He claims to have captured her on video, but was she a ghost? Number 2. The ghostly BURSAR, Cambridge, England. Peterhouse College in Cambridge was founded in 1284 and had a long and varied history, and is one of the oldest and smallest of the undergraduate colleges at Cambridge University. In 1997, 2 butlers working at the college, Matthew Speller and Paul Davis, had an unsettling experience when they started hearing noises coming from the pantry. They were ascending the spiral staircase on the way to cleaning up in the combination room after dinner, where the senior scholars held regular meetings. Suddenly, they both observed a shadowy figure coming out of the panelling and moving diagonally across the room to the fireplace, and then disappeared. The figure was hooded and floating just above the floor. Andrew Mullison, the college treasurer and formerly an agnostic about ghosts, had a similar experience a few months later. At about 11:45 p.m, he entered a room to pick up some fruit off of a table. As he entered the dimly lit combination room, he found it unexpectedly cold, and he suddenly became aware of a presence in one corner. At first, he thought it was somebody that he knew because it was smallish, slightly built and balding, who fitted the description of his friend. It was wearing a wide collar, like a pilgrim, and seemed to be holding a large hat. He moved closer to get a better look and said he wasn't in the slightest bit frightened, as it looked quite harmless and friendly. But as he got closer, he could see it was a distinct ghostly figure. He said he was more concerned about frightening it away. It was very benign. After a few seconds, it quietly disappeared. The room was still very cold, although a fire was still burning in the grate. He said it was quite an extraordinary experience. He didn't mention it to the other fellows for a while because he held a prominent position as financial administrator and did not want to be seen as some nutcase who goes around seeing ghosts. There were questions as to who this ghost could have been, and suspicions fell on Francis Dawes, a former bursar of the college who hanged himself from a bell rope in 1789 after the election of a very unpopular master. The hooded figure seen by the butlers was said to have disappeared near the spot where Dawes' body was found. His body was buried in the churchyard, apparently where there had been numerous exorcisms. Another name put forward was the great uncle of George Washington, who worked there in 1695. There were a few academics at the school who were against exorcising the ghost, believing that a ghost is a priceless cultural, academic and environmental asset. Number 1. Red-headed Ghost Girl, Leicestershire, England. James Bowden was 35 years old and tells of strange events in a house where he had been living for 10 years. The story takes place in 1990, where he claims that he had a guest living with him between the ages of 7 and 12 years old. However, it was not a living guest, but a ghost child, who he claims had been living with him for 10 years. He nicknamed her Henrietta. She had manifested herself through thumping noises and has shown herself to 2 little boys. On one occasion, a friend came for a visit with her 2-year-old son. His friend's son had gone to the toilet, and they could hear him laughing and talking. The child's mother went to him to see who he was talking to, as there was nobody else in the house. Her son said that he was talking to a little girl, and that he told the little girl that it was rude for her to be there because he was sitting on the toilet. His mother asked him to describe the girl, and he said that she had red hair. He again saw the little girl in the bedroom a short time later. She had also shown herself to the neighbour's son, who was also only 2.5 years old. The child was out playing in the garden when his mother looked out and saw him waving at the upstairs window in the room that James slept in. However, the house was empty as he was at work. His mother asked who he was waving at, and he said there was a young girl at the window. His mother looked up but couldn't see anyone. But his son insisted that he could see a young girl. There had been other incidents in the house when James went to bed. He would leave his change on the bedside table and had been woken up by the clinking of the money moving around. James would be watching TV, and when the phone rang or he made himself a drink, on his return he would find that the TV had been switched off and the remote control would be missing. One day he was using a can opener in the kitchen, and as he put it down to attend to other duties, he turned to pick it up, but it had disappeared. Later, when he started decorating his bedroom, he found the can opener under the wardrobe with some other lost items. Once, when he was decorating his bedroom, he put the brush down on the pallet and turned around to find the brush missing. He went into the middle bedroom and found it in there. On another occasion, James and his partner had become so disturbed to what was happening that they left the house. They later returned and entered the bedroom and they felt the young girl appeared to occupy the most. He knelt down to what he thought was the young girl's level to talk to her. He could feel his hair standing up on the back of his neck. In the corner of the room was a Christmas tree, and as he was talking to the young girl, he could see some of the branches moving up and down, as if she was fiddling about with them as she was listening to what he was saying. Another time, the kitchen switch would click up and down. One day, he left a piece of paper and crayon in the bedroom to try and get her to communicate with him, and on returning, found some writing had been scratched on it. He had no idea as to how long the ghost girl had lived there and what era she had come from, but hoped that one day she would eventually cross over and be at peace.